Hi, good morning. My name is Jason.
And my name is Danielle, and we both work at Forbes.
We're so glad to be in Atlanta. This conference is amazing. We're going to talk to you about Angular Universal and walk through a demo that we made. Our agenda for today starts with a description of what Universal is. Then we're going to go through the benefits of Universal.
Next, we'll mention some advanced techniques. And finally, we'll bring this all together through a demo of a fun app we've created.
It's a lot, but we're going to start by asking an important question. What is Angular Universal? So in the good old days, you would just put all of your HTML in the document and then give that to your users. So this would have hello ngAtlanta in the browser. Then JavaScript became all the rage, and instead of putting that content in the HTML, you put in a JavaScript which gets called after the HTML gets returned, and then you would see your beautiful content. How many of you write code for the browser? Awesome, that's less than expected, but it's the morning. You can just nod your heads. How many of you use Angular? That's more people than people that write in the browser. All right. How many of you use Node.js? Awesome. How many of you use Angular in Node.js? Not that many. So this is where Angular Universal comes in. Very basically, it's Angular for Node. So it allows you to run Angular code on the server. How it works is that you write your components and your providers like usual, and then you provide a platform module. This contains some platform-specific providers for your app. So the browser module would provide a browser renderer, and the server module would provide a server renderer. You can even use the same app for Ionic, and this is the best thing about Angular, in my opinion. You can write the same app and then deploy it to many different platforms. This is the lifecycle of what a request looks like. The user sends a request from their browser to our server. And before we send it back, we server render the application into the document before sending it back. And then they get the application and they render it again. So to get started, you just make a CLI project like normal. And then you use this nifty generate universal command. And this will give you a couple things. It generates this extra app in your Angular CLI.json. And this will allow the CLI to know that there's a second app that it's able to build and run. So to build, you just do mg-build --app, and you give it the name of your app. So in this case, it's server. This is basically the same command you use to build your regular application that you would ship to the browser, but you're specifying that second app that we just generated. And it also gives you a server app module. This takes in your app module. And also it gives you a server app module, which gives you the node-specific providers. Then it also manipulates your browser module so that it can understand that it's taking over a server render. Make sure you also turn on initial navigation for the router. This lets Angular know that it needs to do an initial navigation before rendering your app in the browser. And this will help prevent a flash between the transfer between the server render and the client render. The basic idea of rendering server-side is serializing your application state into a string, aka the document. You can use a render module factory function to render a given module factory into a document for a given route. It gets even easier if you're using Express. There's an ngExpress engine which directs Express traffic to the render module factory function we just saw, and then responds with the result, your document. You set it up with something to bootstrap, and then you provide it with the path.
Which leads us to the benefits of server-side rendering. The first benefit is an overall better user experience. I think we can all agree in preferring a fast experience. So our goal here as developers is to provide content for users. The sooner, the better. Users typically don't like to wait for content. Over 50% of sites are abandoned if load time is greater than 3 seconds. So you can create the best looking loading circle, but odds are your users would rather see the content of your site. So faster load time means better user engagement. Star Wars GIFs can't go wrong. Which leads us to the issue of performance. Server-side rendering improves our start render time significantly, particularly for low-performance devices. Up top, we can see a visual comparison between server-side and non-server-side rendering. Our app rendered server-side is 100% loaded before the non-server-side rendered app is halfway complete. In fact, our app rendered server-side even beats Google. Last but not least, server-side rendering benefits SEO. Have you ever gotten a link from someone and not known what it was? This is because the page probably did not contain the right metadata. Without JavaScript, web crawlers have an easier time indexing your site. So server-side rendering also gives social media the ability to show previews of your content. So a really great and efficient way to set that up is using the meta service. Here we have a pretty basic example app meta service that provides the update tag method. Meta tags are ultimately added to your page, ensuring crawlers can read your meta properly. If you really want the best experience across social media, use Open Graph and Twitter card meta tags. You can create services to abstract adding Open Graph and Twitter card meta to your page, ensuring shared posts are rich posts. This helps in maximizing your social distribution. Hooray!
Are you convinced? All right, let me go through some more advanced techniques you can use while doing server-side rendering. So the transfer state API was released recently in 4.3, and it allows you to transfer data between the server and the client. So as I mentioned before, there's actually two applications at play here, and the first one that happens is a server, and the second one is basically independent and happens on the browser. It works very much like a map. First you create a key, and then you can use this key in many different, You can use this key to get and set data. The state persists between server and browser, so what gets set in during the server render is available during the browser. HTTP interceptors were also added recently, and they allow you to hook into your request. So every time you make a request, it goes to the interceptor. If you make a request on a server to render the page, you probably wanted the same information to render the page on the client side. But it doesn't make sense to make the request twice, which is what happens normally. So you can use this interceptor to cache the results while you're doing your server render so that it ends up on the client side without making the API call. And we'll show this later. Caching is one of the most important considerations when doing a server-side application. Your users are probably not right next to your server, so you want to cache your responses in a CDN that has global nodes all over the world. Try to cache your application as long as possible while still serving fresh content. Here are some extra tools that you might find useful when building a node application. You can use Docker to containerize your application and ship it to many different ecosystems. Artillery lets you stress test your application so you can ensure that your application can handle all of the needs of your user base. New Relic can help you debug what's slowing down your responses, and you can make sure that your server responds quickly. You can also ship your server code as a cloud function using either AWS Lambda or Firebase Cloud Functions.
So now it's demo time. So we've created an app using very scientific data. Can I go back?
Oh.
Excuse me one moment. Technical difficulties.
Technical difficulties. We lost our speaker notes.
I'll do some great music for you in the meantime.
I don't think we're going to get it back. That's okay. So the first thing, we're going to start off with showing you how to run the server. So all I'm going to do here in the terminal is npm run server. And this is going to start up an Express server.
All right, let's load up our app. Let's take a look at our server. As we can see, we have made a request to our server. Dun, dun, dun. Now let's check this out on the front end. So we have our lovely fictional Power Women app. This loads our Power Women list. We have our 20 top fictional women in, like I said, very scientific rankings. So looking at our view source, we can see that our styles and further down, our HTML has rendered. And we can see user profiles have been rendered. So we have URLs, images, rankings, names have all been rendered server-side. Now, we're probably actually running on a pretty good device. So what is this going to look like on a low-performance device? Let's check that out. How about we go and disable JavaScript?
So many options.
So little time. All right, let's refresh here. And see, our app actually still loads, no problems. In fact,
See, you don't even need JavaScript.
don't even need JavaScript. Let's navigate a bit. What? Absolutely amazing. So let's re-enable that JavaScript, though. All right, but what about API calls? So let's refresh our page. We can see that we have no API calls actually being made. In fact, let's go to our view source. A little further down, and we can see our data has actually been loaded here. Fabulous, server-side rendering at its best. Now, if we continue to navigate, though, Jason, what's that going to look like?
Well, that's funny. We should expect some server-side calls.
You have it disabled.
I do?
I mean, you had, sorry. Refresh.
So if we navigate here, we should see some API calls being made without a full refresh. Magic, our app has disobeyed us.
How dare it? This never happens. Go back to the list, the actual full list.
Or maybe I'm not just showing it.
Yeah. No.
Don't do live demos. They're hard.
Yeah. This honestly was just working.
Well, there's one more thing we'd like to show you. And that is the metadata we were talking about before.
So if we look in our view source again, find our metadata, we see our meta tags rendered. We also see a little further down, our Open Graph meta tags, as well as our Twitter card meta tags to, again, maximize the social distribution. That way, when we share these links, they will have nice little preview content for all of your friends to see.
All right, that's about it for the demo. And in fact, that's also about it for the talk. So thank you very much for attending. I hope you enjoy your stay at this conference. Here are some extra resources that I recommend you take a look at if you want to get ready in universal rendering. Angular.io has a guide on universal rendering. You can find it at /guide/universal. There's also a story in Angular CLI, which describes how to get started using Angular CLI. And the Angular/universal repo is where we build out the tools like ngExpress engine and the module loader, and also some other engines that let you hook into .NET and stuff like that. You can also check out the Universal Starter to get started right away.
And check us out on Twitter and GitHub. We have the same handles for Twitter and GitHub. So that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for letting us talk. If you have any questions, just let us know.